unseated, undivided, torn apart but reunited.
Ani Wiikwemkoong, Carrie Sinaway Dijna Cause. Hello, everybody. My name is Carrie Sinaway from Wiikwemkoong. Really excited today. What you're seeing here on your screens, whether it's on your television or whether you're watching on your computers or mobile device, is our first talk show here in Wiikwemkoong. So basically, it's just an opportunity for our community members, whether they are leadership, our management, our people who do cultural teachings in the community, people who take care of our lands, our children, our water, anybody. If you look to the left or look to the right of you, I'm sure, and there's someone there would be something interesting that they could talk about, and you never know, they might be sitting here with me someday down the road. So really, it is an opportunity to connect with the entire community, bringing everybody some better understanding, some information, some awareness, some education, and then the opportunity, hopefully, if there's a story or something happening in the community that you hear about here on our show, you might be engaged and get involved. So that's basically what it is to bring all of our people together, an opportunity to talk. So looking at what the name of our show is, we are calling this show Aambe Giigididaa Wiikwemkoong. Aambe Giigididaa Wiikwemkoong. Let's talk Wiikwemkoong. So for our first episode, we have our Wiikwemkoong Ogimaa, Duke Peltier here, just to have a little bit of an informal chit-chat conversation, just to bring some highlights as to what is happening in our community. So we want to welcome Ogimaa.
Oh, miigwech Carrie. It's very exciting to be part of this inaugural talk show, Aambe Giigididaa. I'm ecstatic to actually share a little bit of what's happening, and this is something that we've always wanted to do, and I want to thank you for, as well as First Tel, for taking initiative in putting this show together and committing to do it for the next little while, and hopefully we can get the stories out into that are needed to be told, and all the information out to the community members, and obviously they can send messages either to myself or to yourself or to First Tel, and for story ideas. And it's something that is responsive to what the community has been talking about, in finding other avenues to share the information. And if this is one way that will work, that works, then we'll keep it going. So I'm excited about that.
And you mentioned it, you hit it right on when you say there's stories to tell. So when we're thinking about the stories in our community, we're going to tell the story, but there are lives to tell, right? So there's so many facets of what makes Wiikwemkoong Wiikwemkoong. We have the people who come together as teams. We have those teams who plan, who implement, and everything you see in the community, it's because of one person to a team, to a community, for the community, leading into our futures. And we have all sorts of people involved with that at various levels. In this past year, I think we've seen that first and foremost with the huge challenge of COVID-19 impacting the world, and of course impacting Wiikwemkoong. And I know you were on the front line working with the pandemic teams, and our health organization, education, everybody came together. It was a challenge. Maybe just bring us back a little bit about the experiences and as a leader for Wiikwemkoong and how that was.
Well, it was definitely a learning experience, and I'll call it a historical event, because this pandemic, COVID-19, is, as all pandemics, they don't come along every year. They come along in maybe every generation or every other generation. And the last significant one that really came through this territory was the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. So we do have we're fortunate to have a lot of long-serving staff, not only at our health center, but within the community, that have experience going through the H1N1 pandemic about 15 years ago, and the SARS epidemic that took place also about 20 years ago. So they brought those experiences along and brought them to the forefront when the advisories started to come in about the COVID-19 and coronavirus having an impact in Ontario, and especially when news broke immediately about a case in Sudbury back in early March, and that was as a result of individuals traveling to the larger urban centers where there's more risk of exposure for any individual to contract this COVID-19. So the experience that we have here in the community is second to none. I have to commend the emergency control group as well as the pandemic team that was led by our health director, Mary Jo Wabano, as well as our community health nurse, primary care manager, Teresa Pongwish, and for not only their commitment, but also their research and guiding that process along. Guiding it along by having the daily meetings that we had initially to every other day to weekly, and which is what we're maintaining right now is weekly meetings to this point. But it was from that guidance of that larger group, the pandemic response team, that the recommendations came forward to the council to really take this COVID-19 seriously, because of the health risk to our community, and we have a very vulnerable population. And based on those recommendations, the council asked the appropriate questions, dedicated resources to what the response needed to be, and ultimately what was decided upon was to implement a travel restriction for our community. And with that came obviously a lot of lessons, things that we've learned, and a knowledge base. And some of the programs that have been implemented from that early stages have continued, and some of the things that we have done that our community members have been very appreciative of was the one example, I guess, is the food support program, the food care program, and that allowed for the reassurance to families that any goods that were not available in our local stores, that we were able to provide and top up some of their grocery items that they typically would attain in some of the larger centers on a monthly basis whenever they got their funding sources available to them. So a lot of these types of services came as a result of the larger group coming together and bringing those recommendations to the council, and council supporting that. And each of the council members also have to be commended for the very thoughtful discussions that they have, and bringing forward their own thoughts and providing those that necessary support to implement the recommendations of our pandemic team, and also I guess the ones that worked very hard, like our Bimin Janjaget, Kevin Wasigijik, who was at the forefront at a lot of these meetings, chairing these meetings, and making sure that the administration follows through with the recommendations of the pandemic team. So he also has to be commended for the dedication that he brought to the table and to the community. And it's these types of people that we need to continue to raise up and pat them on the back and continue to thank them for their expertise and their intelligence in guiding the community along to make sure that we all remain safe from COVID-19.
And it's not easy. There's a lot of challenge with that, Ogimaa, and I've seen that over the past couple of months as well. So, and it's something it's not done. I mean, we continue to work together to ensure that COVID-19 stays out of our community. So it's ongoing then.
Well, definitely the programs and services are ongoing. We've had to scale back some of the programs and services just based on the fact that we're in this for the long haul. There is no vaccine. There's nothing imminent at the moment, and a lot of the scientific research that's coming forward isn't necessarily too promising for if we're looking for immediate timelines on getting back to what we viewed as what normal way of living. So we may have to be accustomed to wearing the mask, doing the physical distancing, continuing with our hygiene practices, and obviously limiting our non-essential travel to different areas so that we don't unnecessarily risk not only our own health but those of our loved ones if we take part in some of those activities. So the responsiveness of our community to support our well-being is something that the council has demonstrated and will continue to demonstrate by supporting all these services. And one of the main issues that we're still challenged with is the need for our people to be social butterflies. We need that interaction with our friends and family, and luckily we are at the end of a road. We're on an island. We're farther away from a lot of the major urban centers that are really feeling the impact of COVID-19. So we are fortunate that we can still take in some of the recommendations that are coming out of the provincial government for their restrictions, but we can make those adjustments that where we see fit ourselves here in the community based on what we deem is necessary and allows us to continue to maintain safety. And some of those programs that we do need to work on, though, as a result of limiting social interaction, is making sure that our mental wellness is maintained. So we've just come from a large community gathering that we initiated, that we wanted to make sure that we can do it safely, and that was the haunted trail that we did. And anyone that attended, they would have seen that there was a major lineup for people to get in. They were all taking part in contact tracing. They were providing information. They were taking their temperatures before coming in, and they were screened for any symptoms. And the community came together, all the staff and volunteers, and it was a tremendous event. That it was very much appreciated by not only the young children who it was intended for, but also the adults and the grandparents, because they got to come together in that outdoor setting, not ideal conditions where the wind was blowing and cold, but they were able to at least interact with not only their family bubbles, but other family bubbles, their relatives if they're waiting in the line with each other. So that's one thing that we've been encouraging our staff to bring some of these types of ideas forward, so that we can have a better outlook and to cope with what the realities that we're faced with today. One of the other ones that is supported by the council is sports and recreation activities, and we've some communities haven't opened up their arenas. We did. We've developed a hockey program that's focused on skill development, not necessarily playing a game, but skill development. And at some point, when the leagues can start operating again and we can start traveling, we intend to showcase our young hockey players and bring out that pride of the Wiikwemkoong hockey teams again, and as being contenders wherever they go, and to bring those championships home. And we know that takes place as a result of skill development. So those are two of the things that I can point to in the very, very recent past here in the last few weeks that the council supported, as well as the pandemic team has supported and provided the appropriate safety mechanisms so that our community can come together for these events that they hold near and dear to their heart.
And a really good point here on that, as you're explaining all of this, I'm hearing it's a whole new, you mentioned it's a learning process. It's a learning process for us to readjust, to modify, to live this new reality. But it's also a new process for our planners, for chief and council, for everybody else. You mentioned the the Halloween event. We're looking at, hey, what are we going to do next year? That was great. Let's do it again next year, right? So,
Yep.
you know, out of the COVID challenge, the negative comes this positive. You know, we're getting stronger. We have these new ideas and new possibilities for our community, which I think would be a great idea. That was amazing. So for sure, yeah, a challenge and much to learn and much to gain at the same time when we're looking at this past year with COVID-19. And you mentioned a few times chief and council. We're looking at new chief and council sworn in this year. Congratulations, by the way.
Oh,
I didn't have a chance to say that officially yet. Congratulations, and working with a great team of councillors as well. Some have been there previously, and we have some new ones as well. And again, so it's all learning and teaching. For everybody. And shortly after the swearing in, there was a strategic planning session that Chief and Council did attend, and some priorities were reviewed, identified, discussed. Maybe mentioning some of those.
Well, I think I'm very excited because we do typically here in our community we've always had stable leadership. We don't typically change all the council members or the chief at any given election. There is some definitely 60, 70, 80% retention of the elected members. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing for stability of the community, stability with leadership, and as a result, a lot of the activities that and projects that have been started maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 terms ago are now coming to fruition because of the continuity of the leadership, and with that becomes a wealth of experience, a wealth of knowledge, not only from those that have the incumbents that have retained their positions, but also some of the new ones and returning ones that have previously served. And what's exciting for me is that the community has been very responsive to accepting those that have been elected to serve serve our community who don't primarily reside here. So in that instance, we've been making some accommodations and for their continued participation at our regular council meetings, and whether it's them being in person or obviously right now we're using the Zoom video conferencing platform to run our council meetings, and with that we've been asked by community members to have those meetings broadcast. So now the process is that through our website on wiikwemkoong.ca, there'll be some instructions in the members only page for those that are interested to register. They would obviously need their status card number, and so just as an identifier, and they would get an access code, and they would get into the website area so that they would have the council meeting live streamed to them in the comfort of their own home. So we are trying to respond as best as we can, and it is very exciting to see many of the new approaches, the new ideas, and that have come as a result of our planning session, strategic planning, that confirms much of the projects that we've began to undertake, and obviously the focus, the prioritized focus of this council is the health and well-being of the community, making sure that our children have a good start, supporting their education, trying to create meaningful employment for all of our those that want to be employed. So those are some of the things that our council is providing that strategic direction to our staff members who, and it's the responsibility of our director of operations to make sure that the staff implement those strategic priorities into the work plans, the annual work plans of all of our staff and the departments that they work under. So it's exciting because we've just recently sent down 15 trainees as part of, we found a tenant for our industrial park, and there's 50 jobs that are going to be created there. 50, as I said, 15 of them have already started on the job training, with another 35 more that will be hired in the next couple of weeks. And it's, I guess, appropriate because this company that's coming in, it's a Anishinaabe joint venture with another a manufacturer of personal protective equipment. So they'll be making masks. And we just heard news from the Health Canada and the Chief Medical Officer with new recommendations on the appropriate masks that need to be worn. And this is exciting because the recommendations that is being put forward by Canada is that the 3-ply masks are what is going to be the standard in order to protect and minimize risk to COVID-19. So we're going to be making those masks, and it's the second factory in Canada that produces this grade of mask. So it's very exciting, and when we talk about meaningful employment, these are going to be well-paying jobs, and obviously it's the operation itself is going to be a 24/7 operation, so 3 shifts going all night and all week, and producing masks not only for hospitals and police agencies, but also for communities and schools, and they're produced here by our own people. So which is going to be it is an accomplishment.
That's fantastic, and that's up at the industrial park.
Yes.
Right, because I know a lot of people have been asking questions. They drive by, they see this one building, and they wonder, what's going to be up there, right? So that's a good glimpse into what's happening.
Yeah, and that was the intent. I know the industrial park has been as part of WDC or Nodmagijik's discussions for the last 20 years, and they'd always wanted to attract business, manufacturing type operations, because those are the large employers. Entrepreneurship are the backbone of the economy. However, manufacturing is where many jobs are. So the idea of an industrial park has been a long time coming, and construction started. We were supported by some of the federal agencies, FedNor and Northern Ontario Heritage Fund and Wabatech and those financing agencies, and without any funding from Indigenous Services Canada, which is phenomenal. And so we built it, and now we're seeing the result where the one building that was initially started and is near completion. There's three spaces there that are available for rent, and they are already rented. So those operations will be coming on board very shortly. So that building will be filled. And then obviously we have the pellet distribution center. So people have seen the silos go up a few weeks ago, and a building that's or a garage that's going to house the delivery truck. So that truck goes around delivering bulk pellets to the large commercial buildings that we have, the schools and Chiwigwam and the large apartment complexes. And then at the end of the road in the industrial park, that's where a large building is, and that's where we're going to be producing masks. Well, not ourselves, but a company is renting the space there, and they're going to be producing masks there. So that's what we envisioned for space in our community. So the space is there. We created it, And as the movie in Field of Dreams, if you build it, they'll come. So in this case, they've come right away. So it's exciting. I've seen some of the smiles on the individuals that have agreed to go and do the on-the-job training, that they're excited that they're going to have a full-time job that pays well and here in the community. So that's one thing that I'm excited about, very happy about.
That's phenomenal. That's going to be really exciting to see for sure, Ogimaa. And when you're speaking about all of this, where we've been, what we're doing now, and what, as you mentioned, what you envision, we're talking about nationhood. We're talking about Wiikwemkoong as a nation in itself. And there's so many pieces of the puzzle that you need to put in place and keep it going. I've been in the community, back in the community for the last a little bit over 3 years, and I've seen a lot of progress, and I've seen a lot of focus on some of these initiatives, and I'm lucky to be in that position and working in communications in the community, that I can hear about, I can learn about it, I can see what I need to see about it. So when we're talking about nationhood, it's all of this, bringing it together, that our leadership and our workers in the community do on a daily basis to ensure that we stay strong as Anishinaabe of Wiikwemkoong. So when we're talking about nationhood, that's essentially all these pieces coming together.
Well, I think there's markers of a nation. You need land. You need obviously people, your own citizens, whether it's Anishinaabe or whatever word you want to use, your own people. You need your own resources or currency. So these are markers of a nation. So these are some of the things that is obviously going to take work. It's going to take a lot of sweat and probably some tears along the way. But the foundation of it is something that I've studied myself, whether it's in university or attending conferences prior to me even being on council and becoming a council member and the elected chief, and being at some of these various forums that talk about what are the foundational pieces for communities to rise up and create their own destiny. Some will call it self-government, some will call it self-determination, call it what you will, but taking matters into your own hands and doing it your way, in a structured way, systemic way, and having the people support that. And one of the things that I know that our community has done is there was discussions initiated in 2005 around building a constitution. And 8 years later, it was adopted 9 years later, sorry, in 2014, we adopted the community ratified our own constitution, our Chinoknagewin, which laid out a set of ground rules for governance in the community, governance structures, and the aspirations of how to restore our nation, our nationhood, and our livelihood. So a lot of that work has started, and shouldn't use the word template, but the groundwork has been done through our Constitution that lays out some of the areas that our people agreed with for the council to work on in the community. So when we talk about constitution and development and ratification, so those responsibilities are greater, because previous to that, we were essentially waiting around and seeing what the federal government would say that we need to do now. But now that we have our own structure, we can take our own steps and to address what the community wants are, what the community needs, and how best to do that with our own people. But the challenge is obviously the resources required to do that. So sometimes some people will want a law right now and enforce it, and all those other mechanisms that need to be in there. But we're trying to go as quickly as we can, but we've always been cautioned by the people not to go too fast. But we just want to keep taking those steps forward, because it is something that is required. We have to rebuild our own means of decision making, and that's the way that I believe anyway is through the Constitution and implementing and adopting and creating laws that are necessary, that are acceptable to the people and ratified by the people. So anytime that those discussions happen in the community centers, when our staff put out the notices, it's important for every individual to go out, have that discussion, understand it. If it's not understandable, have another discussion, and until you find out what exactly it is. And if there is some concerns with it, then by all means, have that discussion, talk about it. And we've always tried to respond and to some of those concerns. And if there's amendments or corrections needed, then that's what's going to happen. So these are, when we're talking nationhood, those are some of the things that are absolutely necessary. Our people need to be with us, with the council, and supporting that vision, and supporting the whatever is deemed necessary for community well-being. So those things are at the top of mind of each council meeting, of each council member at each of our meetings. So it entails a whole lot. It is very complex. So it is very complex. It does get tough sometimes. However, those are the necessary discussions that have to happen in order to bring people along, to support those initiatives and the objective of community well-being and self-determination of our own people.
Ogimaa, far too often we do hear a lot of maybe misunderstanding where a lot of people, whether it's in the community here or communities everywhere, basically saying, any leadership, oh, they've made a decision to do this, so we must just listen and that kind of thing, right? But we know, and you mentioned it right now, really decisions and discussions happen because it's the voice of the people. This is what, it's so important, like you said, to engage, to attend, to ask the questions from our community members. Their voice is first and foremost the most important, because it is what our community is saying that lead us into our strategic planning and our plannings and all of these, everything that you just discussed here. So that's really important. And yes, we're in this COVID-19 pandemic, and engaging in community meetings is a bit challenging, but there are ways that our community can remain engaged with chief and council or the decision makers to have their voice heard, so I really enjoy that point. Another key thing that I have seen in the community is that rejuvenation, preservation of the language. That is absolutely key when we're looking at who we are as a people. And we have seen you on the forefront in the community as well, being that voice, that champion for our language.
Yeah, I've obviously I owe that a lot to my mother and my grandmother for instilling the importance of my language and always reminding me, and very pointedly, Nishnaabe Gadao, Gadao Gadao Nishnaabe. So just a very simple life lesson. You're Nishnaabe, use your language. And the other important piece is that they continue to speak to me in our language. And that's the unfortunate part, is that not every family has had that or is able to do that. So, and as a leader in the community, elected leader, always maintained that we need to find ways to support having an uncle or an auntie or adopting a grandma or grandpa for people that want to learn. And in some cases, some people have stepped up and said, "I'll open up my doors to someone that wants to learn." But it is up to the individual. Ich bin schwend mo at win schnabe mo at aber de queen wa we jat over we quadat win botchegazo we. So it's up to the individual that they have to go to be motivated enough to go and seek out those speakers and sit with them. And it doesn't cost a lot of money, but it helps if you take some tea and some cookies and some snacks to sit around the kitchen table and just have a discussion like this, talk around the kitchen table. That's where the language is spoken. That's where you're going to find it. You're not going to find it in a classroom. It's going to be available there, but if you're going to really be immersed into it, you need to go into that type of environment. So when I talk about borrowing or adopting an auntie, uncle, or grandma, grandpa, we have to find ways to make that accessible to the masses for everyone. And we've looked at different avenues, whether it was developing apps that are available on the cell phones for those that have cell phones. We've initiated through our heritage organization, and they have to be commended for all the hard work that they've been doing, as well as the elders that have been sitting with them on a weekly basis, having those discussions and having a collective understanding of what words are referencing different things as part of our daily lives, but also preserving those, whether it's through video or audio recording, but also sharing with amongst their group so that they can go back into their own families and share some of those words that aren't commonly used anymore. So, and while they're doing that, we've looked at trying to support an online portal so that those lessons, those discussions, that knowledge base is available to anyone in the community. So that work is still ongoing, and just recently it's been a vision of the community for a number of years to have a language nest. So the approach that was taken earlier this fall by a dedicated group of volunteers, because that's who's going to make it happen. It's champions like that when they say, "We need to do this, I'm going to do something." I support that. It's easy to support that because there's individuals that are willing to put the work into it, and as opposed to saying, "Here's an issue, deal with it." Or the way that when things happen, it's someone says, "Here's an issue, I'm going to deal with it." So we've seen this request come forward about a language nest, and Pat Mandaman at one of these meetings just finally said, "My house is available. You can use it to start." And now they've have this house there where little children are visiting with the grandmas and aunties that are out there, and they come together and socialize on a daily basis. And that's where we're going to see those results, not tomorrow, but perhaps in next year and 2 years, where we're going to have those fluent language speakers that are this high, and they're going to be the ones that are sharing with their peers some words, but also interacting and conversing with the fluent population that are the older generations. So that's exciting, and I think that's one of the things that we need to continue supporting. The education system has been very responsive, where this year they brought in language speakers that are supporting each of the classroom teachers, and not in an educational or education assistant role, but simply incorporating the language into the classroom. especially if that teacher doesn't have the language as part of their toolbox. So education has been responsive, and they also have to be, we have to thank them for that initiative and finding the funding for that to happen. So there are lots of language programming going on, and with language, the most important thing about being in the Anishinaabe is having that ability to conduct ceremony in our language also. So we've been supporting over the last few years the lodges that are in the community, the Buffalo Sundance Lodge that's here in the community, the Rain Dance Lodge, as well as the Medewan Lodge. So those three lodges have each in their own ways have worked together, but also incorporating language and supporting community well-being by nurturing the individuals to find themselves, nurture their spirit. So, and these are all things that are important and all interconnected.
And I can attest to that. You talk about there's formal learning of the language, but there's that kind of language where you have the learning at home. And I do that with my mother. You know,
Yeah.
She'll say something, or she'll be talking to my uncle, my Jisha. They'll say something, and I just like focus on what they're saying. Okay, I got that word. Okay, Mom, I bet you guys just said something like this. She says, yep, okay. And I went, yeah. So I'm really happy that it's coming together for me. And even with the show and, you know, having our name for the show, I did talk to about 3 or 4 different people in the community, some of our language, people that we go to talk about language, and you know, elders in my family. How would you say this? And everyone has their different ways of saying it, but you know, again, it's our language is not word for word verbatim in English, but it's a description, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm really learning and understanding.
Yeah, it's not static. It's going to, as all cultures evolve, and some words are probably not going to be in use in 20, 30 years. We might have a fully fluent community, but some of those words might not be relevant at that time. And but also some of what I'm happy about too is we initiated this language or word of the day through the radio stations, and I recall yourself being excited to listen in on a daily basis to get another word and get another word, build a vocabulary. Like if individuals continue to do that, if it's one word a day, then by the end of the year you should have a vocabulary of 300 words, and by that time you should be able to have conversing, you'll be able to converse more because you have that vocabulary and you're able to put all those words together somehow.
Somehow,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
in my case, hopefully that would make sense, right? A little bit of words in mixed in. And I think that's really what we're looking at. And you mentioned earlier, you know, we have our champions that they see something in the community. People work together to make progress, to make movement. And, you know, that's what we're seeing here with this talk show. And that's why it was really important to have our Ogimaa, yourself, to be our first official guest on the show, is to, you know, talk about our community, the importance, the foundation, how everybody at home and abroad could be a part of what we do in our community. Just because you don't work, you're not a chief, or you're not a counselor, or you don't work for the band and administration, you do have an important role to play in the foundation of the community where we're going in the future. And our youth are tremendous. You know, we look to them as well as getting involved in our community.
Like on that point, as to really illustrate it, showcase it, is there's a small group that initiated fundraising in the community, and I'm not certain on the exact total amount, but they've through their fundraising efforts in the last 2.5 years, they've reinvested those fundraising proceeds back into the community. So whether it was for individuals attending sporting events previously, or renovating the arena, or building new docks, or supporting other renovations of different community organizations. Like that's as a result of people seeing an issue and coming up with a solution and acting upon it. And those are the things that I get excited about, because that's what we want. That's what I want, is people stepping up, as opposed to casting blame or just throwing a problem on the table and saying, deal with it. Because we do have a phenomenal group of Nishnabek from our community, whether they're living here or outside the community, and it's important that each one of them bring their skills to the forefront and showcase them.
And that's what's really important, for sure. And that's totally what we hope to achieve. That's the intention of what we're doing here for this inaugural show, and then ones to come. So I guess on that note, we'll sum it up. And you did mention the invite is there for our community to get a hold of myself, First Tell, get a hold of Ogimaa as well, to connect. And, if you have story ideas, feature ideas, life ideas, that's what it's all about, just to give a little bit more insight, some more understanding, some more awareness. There's so much happening in our community, and people are doing so many things. Just as I'm sitting here, I can think of a lot, and I'm sure you have, and we had a discussion about this before, and you of course know that firsthand, right? So and when we're going into another important season, or not season, but a celebration in our community, with our Remembrance Day, Veterans Day, and I know you have your family, a personal connection. Maybe just a few words as we.
Yeah, well, I've some of my relatives, my grandparents have all served in the Second World War, Chimigadwin, and they've obviously have their own. They've each had their own stories of how they entered the forces, and their own experiences, and what skills they learned while they were there, and how they brought them back here. And my grandfather, Andrew Manitowabi, was an engineer, and he brought back some of his skills, and obviously as an entrepreneur also, and we see the result of his work here on a daily basis with the Andy's store and everything they've got. And one of the things that my great grandfather Leo Peltier was also in the war, but he was a POW, where he'd been captured, and one of the life lessons that he had shared, because he was asked at the time, like, how did you stay alive, like when you were captured? And one of the only thing that what he did say was that he believed in himself and his people, and that any time that he was asked a question, that he would only respond in the Ep.1, because they kept asking him, like, why are you here? Why are you here? What's your role here? And so he kept answering in Nishnaba language, and they essentially left him alone and until he was released. So he had a strong belief in our language, and that's one of the things that's been passed down to a lot of our family members, is the importance of our language. And then my grandmother, Josephine Green, also served and was part of the group of champions, again, back in 1959-60, where they were having these discussions about bringing the culture back into our community. So she was friends with Rosemary Fisher and others, that Josephine Peltier, and who initiated bringing guests into the community, and had the first powwow in 1960s, 60 years ago. So that's one of the things that I think through their life experiences, they knew what was important, and that was take care of your family, know who you are, and maintain your culture and language. And those are some of the the life values that I've retained from my grandparents, and it's something that we have to pass on to our children and grandchildren, and share those with the community whenever possible, because that's what we're aspiring for, is well-being, and even if it's from the lessons of the great conflicts that took place around the world at the time.
And you're exemplifying that. So, what I'm hearing is the core of nationhood, it starts at home. It starts at home. That's where that seed is planted and it grows. And you take it to the extent of community involvement in planning as well. So, miigwech for that. And on that note, I want to say chimigwech to everyone out there who is joining us for this inaugural talk show. Aambe Giigididaa Wiikwemkoong. I'm looking at him. Aambe Giigididaa Wiikwemkoong. And we hope to see you next time. And again, we'd like to thank Ogimaa Duke Peltier for being a part of this show.
So, chimigwech gehi karin dinin, gapayab mena ishbin wikwejmegom mapi wigigidaa.
Got it. So the contact information to get a hold of us for the show will be right on the screen right after. Chimigwech, bama.
No.